that they are. And they plan this one.
Okay, we'll call to order the June 27th, 2012 City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. The first item on our agenda is consideration of the minutes for two meetings, one from April 25th, 2012, and the other from May 23rd, 2012. Those minutes were provided in our packets. Are there any changes?
No, sir.
Don't think so. Those will stand as approved. Next item is new business. And we'll start with variance requests. The first is application Z12033 by Mr. Adam Dodd. Mr. Dodd is a member of our board, so he would not be able to participate in this application if he was here, but he is absent today, so thought we would disclose that. But in that application, we're requesting a 5-foot variance from the minimum required 35-foot front building setback for principal structures as stated in Chart 2 of the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance for property located in a residential single-family RS-12 zone at 2704 Blooming Oak Place, which is located at the northeast corner of Blooming Oak Place and Osborne Lane. The variance request pertains to the front building setback along the south side of the property adjacent to Osborne Lane. Matthew, would you go over that one for us?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Young. As you mentioned, the property is located at 2704 Blooming Oak Place. I'll show you the aerial photo of the property. It is this lot here is at the northeast corner of Osborne and Blooming Oak. It is a lot in the Crown Point subdivision. It is currently undeveloped. Mr. Dodd has purchased the lot and would like to build a single-family residence on the subject property. And he is requesting a variance, a 5-foot variance for the front setback along Osborne Lane. As you know, single-family residential lots that are corner lots have two front lot lines, in this case one along Blooming Oak and one along Osborne Lane, and two side lot lines, which would be the east and north property lines. Correspondingly, they have two front setbacks and two side setbacks. The applicant would have to comply with the 35-foot front setback along both the property line along Osborne Lane and the property line along Blooming Oak Place. As you can see on the plot plan that he has submitted to us, the front corner of the house along Osborne Lane protrudes slightly less than 5 feet into that 35-foot front setback along Osborne Lane. And as you can also see, the lot is much narrower in the front than it is in the rear. As you can see, the lot actually flares out and becomes wider as the right-of-way of Osborne Lane kind of moves to the southeast. So it's not a perfect rectangle. The applicant has indicated that because the restrictive covenants require a side or rear entry garage, and because the plat prohibits access from Osborne Lane, he is limited to only having access off of Blooming Oak Place. And then in order to get the side entry garage that's required by the restrictive covenants with a wide enough driveway width to be able to back out of the side entry garage and turn around, he had to push his house further to the south, closer to Osborne Lane. Now, it should be noted that the house plan is not an extraordinarily wide house plan. As you can see, it is actually only about 52 feet wide, I believe. And so he has tried to build up instead of out, and he still is having a difficult time meeting that 35-foot front setback along Osborne Lane. And that includes both that area, that corner of the house, it includes a portion of the front porch as well. But as you can see on the plot plan, the rear corner of the house, because the lot does become wider the further east you go, the rear corner of the house is actually not encroaching into that front setback along Osborne Lane. The applicant has indicated another reason why he is requesting the variance is even though he could push the house further back on the property and be totally compliant with the 35-foot setback along Osborne Lane, this would preclude him from being able to build certain accessory structures in the rear of his lot because of several easements that are at the rear of his lot. You'll see there is a water line easement that is, this is actually a drainage easement that is located right in the, runs north and south, right in the middle of his lot. And there's also a water line easement further to the rear. So there's actually two easements that bisect his property, kind of chopping it up and leaving only certain areas that are outside of that easement. So if he doesn't push the house up to the 35-foot front setback along Blooming Oak, if he were to push the house further back, he would lose the ability to put in an in-ground swimming pool in the future, which is what he desires to do. We have received an email from the president of the Homeowners Association. He has indicated that the Homeowners Association has no objections to the proposed variance. Mr. Dodd, as you mentioned, Vice Chairman Young is not present representing the application. However, his contractor, Mr. Brian Burns of Blue Sky Construction, is present to answer any questions that you may have. And before we open the public hearing, I'll show you some photographs of the property. This is the lot with a view from Blooming Oak Place. This is the lot next door to the north. This is a view of the area that is inside of the front setback along Osborne Lane. As you can see, there is currently a berm, and a landscaped berm along Osborne Lane that I believe the subdivision currently maintains. That is actually located on Mr. Dodd's property. There is another view of the berm from Osborne Lane, and that's the house next door. This is the lot directly across the street. This is across the street, one lot up. They're currently building a house. I did drive the neighborhood to verify that all of the garages in the subdivision were side entry or rear entry garages, and all of the homes in the neighborhood have side entry garages. Some of them are the traditional side entry garages that come in from the very side edge of the house, and some of them are the more what we would call courtyard style garages, where the garage protrudes but it still has a side entry kind of in a courtyard style from the front yard. But Mr. Dodd is attempting to comply with that provision of the restrictive covenants and have enough room for an adequate driveway as well. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them before or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for Matthew at this point?
Matthew, just have one. In this email that was part of our packet that I guess the guy's the Homeowners Association president, he mentions that the berm would, he's asking that the berm would not be altered. I guess we're not altering, or Adam wouldn't be altering the berm in any way.
Mr. Dodd indicated to me by email after I sent that to him that his construction will not affect that landscape berm, and Mr. Burns, I imagine, could confirm that. He's indicated that that is correct.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burns, anything else you'd like to add to this application? No. Okay, thanks. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve the variance request.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There are none. That application has been approved. Our next application is application Z12034 by Mr. Monty Turner, requesting the following variances from property located in a commercial highway zone at 115 Lassiter Drive. There are three components to this application. The first one is pertaining to a proposed building, a 15-foot variance from the minimum required 42-foot front building setback along Lassiter Drive for principal structures as stated in Chart 2 of the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance. The second is pertaining to proposed heating and air equipment and enclosure, a variance from Section 25E5 of the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, which states that in all commercial and industrial districts, accessory structures and uses shall comply with the same front setback as is required for the principal structure. And the third component is pertaining to proposed heating and air equipment and enclosure, a 24-foot variance from the minimum required 42-foot front building setback along Lassiter Drive for accessory structures as stated in Chart 2 of the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance. Matthew.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Young. The subject property is a double frontage lot located currently at 115 Lassiter. You might recognize the property. It's right next to Camino Real. It's an old car wash that has recently closed down. We'll show the aerial photograph now if we could. Here's the old car wash here. Lassiter Drive, as you know, is a kind of a remnant of the old Mercury Boulevard, I believe, that now serves as a connector street between Mercury and East Main. This is the Circle K, I believe it's a Marathon now, right there along East Main Street, and the Slick Pig is a couple doors down. Here's the old car wash that is on the subject property, and it's right next to the Camino Real. Just to the west of the subject property is a small office building, and there's a small retail building located at the intersection of Lassiter and Mercury. The applicant was before the Planning Commission last Wednesday for site plan approval for the subject property. Mr. Turner, the applicant, develops Dollar General stores, and his goal is to demolish the existing car wash building and build a new Dollar General in its place. The new Dollar General would actually face Mercury Boulevard. As I mentioned, it's a double frontage lot with both frontage along Mercury and Lassiter. If we could bring that aerial photograph back up again. See, only the northern half of the lot facing Lassiter is developed now, but it actually has frontage and access down here along its south side to Mercury Boulevard. And Mr. Turner would actually orient the building to face Mercury Boulevard, and the rear of the building would face Lassiter Drive. With double frontage lots, however, there are two front setback requirements along each, unless by way of the plat, access is restricted to one of those two front lot lines. If that's not done, then both are still considered front lot lines and both have corresponding front setbacks. In this case, because the property is zoned commercial highway, there is a 42-foot front setback along Lassiter Drive and a 42-foot front setback along Mercury Boulevard. I'll show you the site plan for the subject property. Here is the proposed building. It would actually run long ways north and south as opposed to east and west. It is proposed to have access to Mercury and access up here to Lassiter Drive. The building itself would encroach into the front setback along Lassiter by approximately 15 feet, requiring a 15-foot front setback variance for the principal structure itself. So it would be about 27 feet from the front property line along Lassiter Drive. Now, the applicant is also requesting a variance for the HVAC equipment. And the HVAC equipment, just like when we reviewed First Baptist Church and their additions back in January, the HVAC equipment is considered an accessory structure, as is the enclosure. And in discussing this with the applicant about how, if he is going to locate that HVAC equipment and the mechanical equipment in the front setback along Lassiter, is he going to make a commitment to screen that? And by his plans and by the correspondence that he's had with staff, he is making a commitment to screen the HVAC equipment along Lassiter Drive with a screen wall as well as landscaping. And you can see on the plans that there is landscaping along the front of that screen wall, and the screen wall wraps around the entire HVAC pad. But accessory structures in commercial and industrial districts are required to comply with the same setbacks as the principal structure. So without a variance, the HVAC equipment would be required to be located outside of that 42-foot front setback. So in addition to the front setback variance for the principal structure, the applicant is also requesting variances from the section that says that it must comply with the front setback, the same front setback as the principal structure, as well as a 24-foot variance from the 42-foot front building setback along Lassiter Drive. This would mean that the HVAC equipment and the screen wall would be approximately 18 feet off of the Lassiter Drive front property line. Now, I mentioned just a moment ago that the applicant is committing to screening that HVAC equipment from Lassiter Drive. When he appeared before the Planning Commission last week, this was something along the lines of what he was committing to, although it may slightly differ from this. This is just a photograph of an example, and I laid before you a photograph on your desk. This photograph, it shows a combination of brick screen wall with some wood as well. And of course, there will need to be gates to actually get into the HVAC equipment area. In the early 1990s, TDOT constructed improvements to Mercury Boulevard and extended it eastward south of the subject property. Lassiter Drive was previously a part of Mercury Boulevard before Mercury Boulevard was extended eastward. Now it serves as a short connector street between Mercury and East Main. As a result, however, the subject property does have two front property lines and two corresponding front setback requirements to contend with. In his letter to the BZA, the applicant also indicates that the distance of the building will be consistent with the other adjacent buildings along Lassiter Drive. In 1995, the BZA granted a 17-foot front setback variance to the small office building next door to the west, and that's an appraiser's office. In addition, although staff cannot find any record of a variance for the restaurant building to the east, which is the older portion of the Camino Real, which was constructed in 1976, it is also approximately 25 feet from the front property line along Lassiter Drive. The applicant also indicates that there are design challenges from a stormwater management standpoint, and the site plan does show two detention ponds proposed on site. The applicant states that shifting the building to the north as proposed will facilitate a more efficient handling of stormwater in the area. Mr. Turner is in attendance if you have any questions for him before or after the public hearing. His engineer, Mr. Steve Steele, is also present. Each of the three items will need to be taken in separate motions. And just real quick before we open the public hearing, I'll show you some photographs of the site and the surrounding area. This is the car wash that was previously in operation on the site. It has closed. Just another view of the car wash building. That is, as I mentioned, proposed to be demolished. This is looking back down towards Mercury Boulevard. As I mentioned, the whole site will be developed and there will be access down onto Mercury Boulevard. This is the Camino Real just to the east. As you can see, that building is approximately 25 feet from the front property line along Lassiter. This is the office building just to the west that was granted a 17-foot front setback variance back in 1995. This is just looking down Lassiter to the west. That's that small building next door, and a little bit further down the street you can see a retail building. This is directly across Lassiter Drive. That's the Marathon gas station. If the board has any questions either before or after the public hearing, I'll be happy to answer them.
Matthew, I need to mention, when I looked at the minutes and the agendas, I didn't catch this was a Dollar General property. Dollar General is probably my first or second biggest customer, and I'm not sure that I need to participate in. I'm sorry for Mr. Turner and the representatives that have planned to come here, but I figure I need to mention that that's probably an issue.
I think with them as a customer and a significant customer, that would probably create the kind of a financial interest that would preclude you from voting on this matter. We can go ahead and have the public hearing, but I believe that the BZA is going to have to defer action until the next meeting.
Yeah, I figured that was the case. And again, I apologize for not catching that. I certainly read over the minutes and getting prepared for the meeting, just didn't catch that it was Dollar General there. Do we go ahead and have the public
Go ahead and
hearing?
have the public hearing, yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Matthew at this point? Mr. Turner, anything else you'd like to add to this application at this point? At this time, we'll hold the public hearing. Is anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. We need to make a motion.
A motion to defer would be in order, yes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So the motion to defer has been approved, and again, I apologize for bringing everybody in and not being able to act on it. Our next application is under special use permits / variance request. It's application Z12035 by Mr. R. Lyle Lynch of Johnson & Bailey Architects for City of Murfreesboro Schools, making the following request for property located at 307 South Baird Lane in a residential single-family RS-15 zone. There are two components to this application. A special use permit in order to expand an existing institutional group assembly use public school. The applicant is seeking approval to construct a 12,778 square foot building addition as well as other site improvements. And second, a variance from section 9D2 ZZ1 of the Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, which states that parking areas for institutional group assembly uses shall not be permitted in the required front yard. This variance request pertains to a proposed parking area in the required front yard along Jupiter Place. Matthew.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Young. The subject property is located, actually has frontage on four different streets. You can see the aerial photograph here. It's also, its address is 307 South Baird Lane, but it also has frontage on Mercury Boulevard, Jupiter Place, and Minerva Drive. property is zoned RS-15. You may recall that Hobgood School, which is the existing elementary school on the subject property, came before you in February for an expansion of about 5,000 square feet for some additional classroom space. That was classroom space that they wanted to have built and ready in time for the upcoming school year. The construction on that is well underway, and they are hopeful to have that completed by the beginning of the school year. This is more of a comprehensive look at the site. They knew this was coming. This is kind of the phase 2 of the Hobgood improvements. They didn't have these plans completely ready in February, but they knew they needed to go ahead and move forward with the plans for the current addition that's being constructed right now. What they are looking to do is to expand the existing institutional group assembly use, which is the public elementary school. And the applicant is seeking to construct a 12,778 square foot building addition, as well as other site improvements. And he's also requesting a variance with regards to parking in the front yard. And I'll get to the variance in just a little while. If we could pull up the aerial photo again. As you can see, here is the existing Hobgood School. And the existing parking lot here is along South Baird Lane. There's also an existing driveway off of Jupiter Place. The fire hall that serves this area is also located on the same property. The applicant is looking to actually rework the parking lot along Baird Lane and add another access point to completely kind of improve the internal circulation of the site. I think they have had issues with conflicts between passenger travel and bus travel coming in and out off of Baird Lane. So they have come up with a new traffic management plan in consultation with the city's traffic engineer, and so you'll see that the existing parking lot along Baird Lane has been completely reworked. One of the requirements, as I mentioned, is that parking for institutional group assembly uses in residential zoning districts is not allowed in the required front yard. The existing parking lot on Baird Lane, which predates our current zoning ordinance, is actually already in the required front yard along Baird Lane. They're actually scooting it back. This portion of the parking lot is grandfathered in, and as such, no variance is required in order to keep the existing parking lot within that required front yard. But there is this loop along Jupiter Place has been used informally by employees in the past as a parking area. And so instead of being available to be used as a two-way travel aisle, it has been blocked with the casual by employees parking there in a somewhat casual manner. So what the applicant is proposing to do is to add about 18 or 19 parking spaces along that driveway aisle on the inside of it, in order to kind of formalize some parking spaces off that driveway aisle, and to leave the actual driveway aisle free and clear of the parking of vehicles. But because a portion of those new parking spaces are to be located in the required front yard or the required front setback, they are having to request a variance from the requirement that no parking spaces are allowed in the required front yard. Because the headlights would be pointed, or the front of the cars would be pointed towards the residences along Jupiter Place, staff has asked the applicant to provide some landscaping, some shrubbery along the front of those parking spaces, as well as the front of the parking spaces that face Baird Lane. And the applicant has been very agreeable to do so, to block any glare of headlights from those cars across Baird Lane and across Jupiter Place. Now, the actual addition, you'll see here on the site plan, the larger addition here which is at 12,778 square foot administration addition and media room addition. And then there's a smaller addition here, which is a 1,835 square foot food service area addition. And I misspoke earlier. The media and administration addition is actually 10,943 square feet, and the entire additions combined will be 12,778 square feet. This would bring the total square footage of the elementary school to 68,975 square feet. The site will continue to meet minimum parking requirements, and they're actually increasing formally increasing the number of parking spaces on site, and by adding those parking spaces along Jupiter Place, they would help to get the people who are parking casually along that driveway aisle to more formal parking spaces. The lot size meets minimum requirements for the proposed use. There will be no external broadcast system, nor will there be any new accommodations for RV hookups. The existing dumpsters on site are not in an enclosure. Currently, the proposed plan makes provisions for a new dumpster location adjacent to the food service area addition. So they will actually have a formal enclosure now with this plan, so they're improving that aspect of the plan. And that dumpster area will be screened by a new brick screen wall. There will be modifications to the existing site lighting as a part of the redesign of the parking lot. The applicant has submitted a photometric lighting plan showing that the lighting levels at the front property line along Baird are less than 0.5 foot candles, which is the maximum per our zoning ordinance that can be at a property line. And according to the applicant, no additional lighting is proposed in the new parking area along Jupiter Place. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing. Mr. Lynch is in attendance as well. If you have any questions for him, both the variance and the special use permit will need to be taken in separate motions. And I will show you a couple of photographs, as I always tend to do. First of all, here is the elevation that Mr. Lynch has provided showing the addition. This taller building back here is the existing school building, and this is the proposed media/administration addition. And that addition would be going where the existing tennis courts are located now. Those tennis courts are basically not functional anymore. Here's the existing school. Tried to give you a photograph of where that the larger addition will be located. This is a view of the tennis courts, which will be raised as a part of this application. This is the existing parking lot, which will be reworked. And the next couple shots are just some snapshots of the residential properties across South Baird Lane. Here you can see part of that loop along Jupiter Place. This photograph is taken from Jupiter Place. And those new parking spaces will go in this grass area right here. This shows the continuation of that loop, and as you can see, there is one pickup truck parked right there, kind of casually in that loop. And that's what they're seeking to eliminate by actually constructing some formal parking spaces. This orange construction fencing denotes the area where they are building the current addition, which is adjacent to that loop. And once again, a view of the current construction. And these are just a view of the residences across Jupiter Place. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, and Mr. Lynch is present.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for Matthew at this point? Mr. Lynch, anything you'd like to add to this application? At this time, we'll conduct the public hearing. Is anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for discussions or a motion. And again, we have two components here, the special use permit and then a variance for the parking in the front yard.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the special use permit.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none. That special use permit has been approved. The next, we'll take the parking area.
Vice Chairman Young, I will make a motion that we approve the variance subject to staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. That's been approved also. Thank you for coming in. Our next application is a special use permit, application Z12036 by Mr. Gary Anderson from Murfreesboro City Schools, requesting a special use permit in order to expand an existing institutional group assembly use, public school, in a residential single-family RS-12 zone for property located at 2340 St. Andrews Drive. The applicant is seeking approval for the placement of 3 portable classroom buildings. Matthew.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Young. Subject property, I'm sure you all are familiar with, is located along the west side of St. Andrews Drive. It's known as the Scales Elementary School. Show you an aerial photograph of the property. It's just north of Highway 99, and it is bounded, of course, on the east side by St. Andrews Drive, and on the north and south side by single-family residences located in the Salem Cove subdivision. The applicant has submitted this application for the placement of 3 portables on the school property. It's my understanding from the applicant that he is looking to have these portables on site for 2 years. He is attempting to get funding for a new elementary school on the west side of town, and this measure of putting the 3 portables on site will be a temporary measure in order to help alleviate overcrowding at Scales until the new elementary school is built. The proposed location for the portables is here. This is the kind of a front wing of the building, which this is the area, the part of the building that protrudes closest out towards St. Andrews Drive. This is kind of a north wing of the building, form kind of an L, and they are proposing to locate the portables here, which would be somewhat on the northeast side of the building. The applicants state that this was not their first choice to locate the portables. Mr. Anderson has indicated that they looked into other options, not so close to the front of the site, but that this was the most practical option given the location of sanitary sewer on site. You can see here on the site plan they have circled the area and labeled it as portable classroom area. And then more specifically, the applicant has submitted a site plan that shows the 3 portable classroom buildings. As you can see, the front of the portables are basically even with the front wing of the building. They fit within this L here. Staff has done some measurements on the city's GIS system, and the portables are approximately 350 feet from the front property line along St. Andrews Drive and approximately 170 feet from the northern property line, which would be the common property line that the school shares with the residences on Deerview Drive. Two of the portables will be 24 by 42, and one of the portables will be 28 by 64. There will be a total of 4 classrooms between the 3 buildings. As you can see, one of the buildings is larger than the other 2. When Scales was originally approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals in 2004, no landscape buffer was required along the north or south lot lines adjacent to the lots in Salem Cove, which were not yet recorded lots at the time of approval. A number of the property owners in Salem Cove on Deerview Drive have chosen to plant trees at the rear of their lots. On the school property, however, there is only the standard perimeter landscaping along the northern property line. An existing tree row along St. Andrews Drive was preserved during the original construction, and it still stands today. The planning staff has consulted with the applicant about providing additional landscape screening both to the north and to the east of the proposed portables, and he is amenable to doing so. The additional landscaping would help screen the portable buildings from the residential properties to the north, as well as from St. Andrews Drive. The planning staff has consulted with the Urban Environmental Department about the implementation of an effective landscape screen for the proposed portable classroom buildings. And as I mentioned in the staff comments, I expected to have additional comments at the meeting. After the Urban Environmental Department went to look at the situation, they thought that a fence might be a viable option as well along that northern property line. But the neighbors have contacted staff and have expressed an interest in some type of screening, both along the front of the buildings to help screen the view from St. Andrews Drive, as well as from the rear of the lots along Deerview Drive. With regards to the additional standards for institutional group assembly uses, and it goes without saying, but the school is an institutional group assembly use, and any type of expansion of the school in an RS-12 zone does require a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals. And in the last paragraph, I've addressed some of the additional standards for institutional group assembly uses. Many of those do not apply, as there are no additional recreation fields, no additional proposals for external broadcast of sound or music. This application will not modify the existing facilities for solid waste. A photometric lighting plan was not required for this plan, as the only lights that are proposed with these portables are just, as the applicant called it in his write-up, porch lights. With that being said, based upon the feedback that I've received from the neighbors and based upon my research into the issue and my discussions with Urban Environmental Department and with the applicant and with some of the neighboring property owners, what I thought would be best would be to bring that up for discussion to the board and see what the board thought would be appropriate as a screen for these portables. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but I'll show you the existing property now. This is looking at the site from across St. Andrews Drive, and where these white bands are where the portables are proposed to be located. And this is from the sidewalk along St. Andrews Drive in front of the school. And you can see the existing tree row, but it is not what we would consider a buffer. It is just an old existing tree row that does have some gaps in it. This is the area where the portables are proposed to be located. You can see it's kind of in the inside of the L of that building. And this is looking up that northern wing. And this is that front wing. As I mentioned, the portables would be relatively even with the front of that front wing. This is looking back out towards St. Andrews Drive from where the front of the portables would be located. As you can see, there's an existing parking lot, and that's that tree row that I mentioned earlier. That's about a 350-foot distance to the front property line from those portables. And this is just a view from where the portables would be located, looking to the northeast corner of the property. St. Andrews Drive would be running along here. This is just a view of some of the houses along Deerview Drive. This is the rear of those lots. As I mentioned before, some of those houses, some of those property owners have planted evergreen screening on their side of the property line. Just another view of the properties to the north. And another view of the properties to the north. There's the very northern edge of the school building. This is just kind of looking down the property line. See, here is the residential properties to the north, and these are the existing trees on the school property. As I mentioned, no buffer was required back in 2004, and those are just regular perimeter planting yard trees. Kind of get a better view of it in this photograph. So these are mostly deciduous trees, spaced 25 to 40 feet apart. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Anderson is in attendance if you have any questions for him as well.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for Matthew at this point?
I have one, Matthew. In looking at this site plan here, it's got, alternate number 1 and alternate number 2. And I know you, as your presentation, you mentioned it was a sanitary sewer issue, but it would, stand to reason that alternate number 1 or alternate number 2, in my view, would be the better of the three. So can someone explain what the issue is with the sanitary sewer?
And I'm not sure what the alternate number 1 and alternate number 2 are referring to. I don't believe those are pertinent to this plan. I think what Huddleston Steel did was they took a copy of the original site plan, which had the alternate number 1 and alternate number 2, and I'm not sure what those were referring to back when the site was built. But I think the only new thing they've drawn on there is just the circle that says portable classroom area. I don't believe that those other circles represent alternative areas for the portables. And when I looked at that myself, I had to do a double take because I was a little bit confused.
Well, then I'll ask the question differently then. Was there an alternate site looked at with respects to putting these portables versus in the front of the building?
I think I would have to let the applicant answer that question.
Okay.
And his engineer is here as well. If you have
Okay.
questions for him. You want the aerial photo? Okay.
Hi, I'm Gary Anderson. Thank you. On the plan, if we can take a look here, I can show you. Where it currently is showing here is where we decided. We look back here, and we look back over here. Both of these have drainage ditch issues that run through them and are much more intense slope down, which gave us issues there. The sewer line comes in from the front here, and the electric line comes in from the front, so we would have to go all the way around to get those services. This area is flat, and we have access into the building right here through the front into a lobby, into the gymnasium for the children to get inside the building easier. We had issues with the back. They would have to go through classrooms to get in. So this was decided as the best site for this purpose.
Okay. So as part of Matthew's presentation, then The thought process is that these would be here for 2 years.
Yes, sir. We have proposed to the City Council, and they're going to look at their capital improvement plan at their work session in July, to have another school open in 2 years for the west side of town. At that point is when we intend to take these building facilities down.
Okay. And my only other comment would be is, I would dare say if this was a private school, we would be doing everything that we could to keep portables from being in front of the school. So we need to look strongly at what screening, whether it's fence or otherwise, that we will have with respects to these portables.
Yes, sir.
That's a good point. While Mr. Anderson's there, any other questions from Mr. Anderson?
Thank you.
Thank you. If you would mind coming to the podium here, if you don't mind.
Would it be appropriate just to open the public hearing, Mr. Ives?
Yeah, excuse me, yeah.
Okay. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present speaking for or against, feel free to come up, and it looks like we have one. So. State your name and address if you don't
My name
mind.
is Wayne Belt, and I'm with Decker and Belt Company, and we developed all this section of St. Andrews, and I'm the chairman of the Salem Cove Owners Association, of the Salem Cove Crossing Owners Association, and when you leave the school and head toward Highway 99, I own all the vacant land on the right side and on the left side where there's no buildings. I'll be the person on 42 lots in the subdivision that has the potential to be affected the most by what happens here. As I was riding the other day in front of John Pittard School, I tried to imagine 3 portables in front of John Pittard School. It was kind of hard to imagine, but I understand this Scales is the largest school. We are proud sponsors of Scales School and have been involved with it the whole time. And the portable idea, my question I was going to ask is on that picture that Matthew just shown, the driveway off Deerview and the driveway off of Salem Cove Lane, those are all private drives, and the city owns all of that, and there's sewer on those roads and there's electricity. So looking at the front of the road and saying that's the only place where there's a sewer, I'm thinking right here in that street there's a sewer where your driveway goes out on either side. So the option of coming, I understand. I just want to clarify that there's electricity there, and it's all underground, and there's boxes both on St. Andrew, on Deerview and on Salem Cove Lane. So when I first heard, I was hoping or thinking that perhaps that could be in the back, but I can see it's probably a matter of economics and what it would cost to do that, and I can appreciate it. It softens the blow if it's only for 2 years, and so that way it's not permanent and forever. So with that in mind, what I would like to see the city do is, in a good neighbor effort, I actually served on the committee that set up the standards for many of the way you see the buildings now and some of the way that landscape happened here a few years back. And I know as a developer, what I have to do I own the mini storage building right down here, and between me and the church, I had to put a Class D, and the church said, no, you don't have to do that, but I was held to a very high standard. Basically, along St. Andrews and with the neighbors, there are some neighbors whose patios will look directly in the back of the double wides. Is if we could have some heavy landscaping, and certainly I don't think they need to put it in this week at 108 degrees, but in October in the fall. But I would like to see it be thicker than even what a city standard might normally be, to soften the blow where you can really truly screen it. The trees that are on St. Andrews, we actually, when we developed that, we intentionally developed this whole street and road to conserve those, but they're not a screen. They're just trees sitting there. They don't really buffer much. But that actually was the lane where the farmer drove down between the rows, and there were fence rows, and there was actually a lane of trees on either side, and we gave up one. But I would really like to see, coming from the parking lot edge, going over toward the neighbor and down somewhere behind there, just a thick hedge, and it needs to be tall enough that it serves a purpose. If it's not 6 or 7 foot tall when you start, we can start out down here. You might as well not have it. But hopefully as a good neighbor, and realizing that does have some expense, but it's probably not near the expense if you had to locate this in the back, what utilities would cost. Consider doing that to soften the blow of how it would affect it. We understand the progress and understand the need to do it and want to be good neighbors, but we would hope that we could have that same thing extended to us. A mention was made in one of the conversations even about a white fence. This is a picky subdivision because there's no two elevations the same on any two streets. Every house is reviewed, every placement of the garage, aesthetically, everything that's placed, including every color in here. And so this area, all the area, Publix, Walgreens, McDonald's, all have brown tone and tan looking areas. If you were to get into, and I'm not sure the neighbors would want it, a fence across the guys for Deerview, I did see a tan one out on DeJarnett Lane, right in front of Pitts Lane. It's a plastic looking, but it's a softer color. It doesn't call as much attention if you were to do that there. But I really think for St. Andrews, and maybe perhaps for there, a real thick buffer would be ideal. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you for your time. Anyone else like to speak to this application?
I would like to just go on record following Mr. Belt. I'm Ralph Owen, and wherever that picture went, does it work? I live right there. And if you step it off, pull a tape or a rope or whatever you want to pull, it's going to be just a short of 170 feet off of my back door. I would just simply ask that you not approve it today until we all, as a neighborhood, are in consensus with what's going on, unless you want to buy my house. And then, you can add it into the school system. That'd be fine with me. But just as a matter of property value, if you would consider that you live there, and would you want those 3 portables in your backyard? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else present?
Hi there. My name is Scott Ferguson, and I live next door to Ralph. I guess one of my major considerations on this is Mr. Belt had actually pointed it out about why it could not go into the back of the school versus the front of the school. The 2-year time frame is a little disconcerting to me, the fact that the funds for a new school have not been approved. There are several over and over instances of portables being put on public schools that have been there, and they're not portable anymore. A prime example is drive on down near the Blackman Elementary. If you drive down Fortress Boulevard, that's supposedly in the back of the school, but it faces Fortress Boulevard, and they're very unsightly looking. Same as on, I notice Blackman High School also has these. And I would like to know if there's been any instance where portables have been put on and have been removed within the time frame that they were originally stated for. I personally have doubts that the funding will be approved and that the building will be built such that the portables can be removed within the 2-year time frame. I, too, am concerned about the effects on our property values of a possible long-term buildings on out here. Some of the other suggestions I might add is that part of our homeowners' covenant requirements require that for one, any outbuilding, and I understand Scales Elementary does not fall within our neighborhood covenant, but it's surrounded by our neighborhood covenant. Any outbuilding within our neighborhood has to be located in the back of the structure. The other thing is it has to be bricked or stoned or sided and roofed to match the main structure. There's a few instances of outbuildings in our neighborhood that have been very tastefully done and have been bricked to match the houses that they reside with. I don't know if that's an option here on a temporary building, is to brick them to make them look just like Scales Elementary. At that point, does it become a temporary building or a permanent building? I mean, that's probably a question you all need to answer on that. But as far as putting up just a heavy screen, as long as Mr. Belt says, as long as it's tall enough and heavy enough, I would not have too much of an issue with that. As far as fencing goes, all the fencing requirements around in our neighborhood are wrought iron or aluminum to look like wrought iron. And I know you can get those with a woven screen in there as a privacy fence. I would ask that that be brought in consideration also. But like Mr. Owen has stated, I would like to see a little bit further open discussion and consensus among, I guess, the homeowners is if before a final decision is made on this. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you for coming in.
Mr. Ferguson, could we have your address for the record?
Yes, 3423 Deerview. If you put on the overhead,
Yes, if we could put that back up,
Yes.
you could show us where you live, that would be great.
where's the mouse here thing that you do that?
It's on the table there.
I live right there in the corner.
Okay, so you're on the corner, and Mr. Owen is right next to you.
Yes, I'm right on the corner of the drive that goes back, and Mr. Owen is right there. And, this part of the building back here, I too have a construction background, and one of the other issues that I got to say from this front lot, there has been water drainage issues up in this area, and that has been regraded, I know, at least 2 times. During heavy rains, the culvert, the water, they've tried very hard to divert all this water line all the way down here through this small little culvert that runs underneath that road. I've had water back up to where it's almost gotten into my crawl space in my yard on a heavy rain. I'm a little concerned about how that's going to affect the water drainage off of there. I'm assuming that civil engineers can do a well enough job on that, but without any structure, I don't believe it's been addressed at this point. As far as the back issue on there, this is a fairly flat area up in here. It's only until you get out here towards where this culvert runs underneath that it becomes much more sloped, to the point to where teachers come and park their cars all the time, all the way up, all along right in this area. This is also the use that the kids use out here for when they go out to gym class. That's the area that they go out and they play in. So I'm not sure. My son used to go there for 4.5 years, and so I'm very familiar with Scales. I'm a little surprised that they actually have an overcrowding issue, because as of 1.5 years ago, they actually had to lay some teachers off and actually had empty classrooms. So I don't know what happened in the 1.5 years that has required them to all of a sudden have a huge student population surge. But, I'm not going to question that. But, there are quite a few concerns that I have here, not only from a child safety standpoint, as far as them, being out more towards the front of the school versus the back of the school, there not being some type of physical barrier out there to protect the kids. I'm a little, I don't know how the school got approved without having a hard fence put up along the back there. I've seen, children wandering into the yards in the back there, retrieving balls and stuff like that. So, but that's all I have to say on it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this application?
Good afternoon, Chairman Young and members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel Engineering. We drew up the original plans for this school as well as the plans for these proposed portable classrooms. The main thing we were focusing on was getting these portables in the right place and getting the grades in the right way where it'll drain properly and be handicap accessible. We did put together another sheet which showed where the portables would be just using an old drawing, and that old drawing referred to a couple of alternatives that the original architect was looking at when he bid the job. So yeah, those do not pertain to this project. We did look at other locations and tried to find where would be the best place to put these portables, and this became the only location that A, would allow proper drainage, and B, would provide an economically feasible location. The other locations, there were some other possibilities that were mentioned. Those are in drainage-sensitive areas where water is directed to, so we don't need to put portable classrooms where water is directed to. Also, to put it in other locations other than this one, this location, the sewer and the electricity is right there. It's going to be right under the buildings. To put it in other places, we would have to extend that sanitary sewer, which would become very expensive for portable classrooms. If these were to be permanent, we might could justify such an expense over a longer period of time, but these are not intended to be permanent. They are temporary portable classrooms. And so we've heard a lot of good comments this afternoon about screening. I think that is something proper to do at this location for this use, and we do agree that we'll work with Urban Environmental and Mr. Blomley to come up with a suitable evergreen screening for these portable classrooms. We would like to get your approval today, subject to working out that screening. If we wait another month, we won't get these in time for school opening, and so this is very critical today to get a decision, and we'll work on that evergreen screening. As Mr. Belt mentioned, it'd probably be best to plan it a little later in the year anyway. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any question, Mr. Huddleston, at this point?
I mean, Mr. Huddleston, I understand the need for it to be done quickly, and I'd be even willing to come to a special meeting if we need to come to a special meeting. But I think for the comfort level of the neighbors that are here, that we need to see what this screening is going to look like, because I do think it is different, for the lack of a better term, that we're putting portables in front of a school. I mean, I just think that's it's different. I mean, I've never seen that, and I would say that if this wasn't a city school, we would be doing all we could do to deter that from occurring, and that's just my opinion. But I mean, I would like to see, so that the neighbors could see what this berm is going to look like, or what the fence is going to look like. And again, I'm not trying to obligate the rest of the board here, but even if it took coming back before the next meeting so you could get it done, I understand the reasons why it has to be done. I'm not against necessarily based upon the reasons why it needs to be placed here, but I think as a compromise, we need to be able to show what this thing's going to look like in the end, so everybody's got a comfort level with it.
We definitely think that the evergreen trees are a much better alternative than providing some kind of fence.
In talking with Ms. Holloway, our urban environmental director, she did recommend that the trees go in no later than November 30th if there were some type of planting requirement as screening for this site. She said or she and Mr. Barbie, her assistant, both said that the optimal time to plant would be between mid-November and late November.
And the thought at this point would be to leave them bare until then, I guess, no, that they're leaning towards the plantings.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Okay. I guess, if anyone else wishing to speak to this application?
Hello. I'm Dawn Tunstall. I am Scott and Ralph's neighbor along Deerview Drive. If you put this up, I can show you where I live. I am the third one right here. We have just recently added a covered patio onto the back of our home so that we can enjoy sitting outside, and we noticed some work being done over here in the schoolyard, and asked around and found out that these portables were going to be placed there. As you can imagine, we were very upset with the fact that we had just built this beautiful covered area to enjoy the outside, and what we're going to be looking at now is going to be school portables. Most of the men who have already spoken have said the same thing that I had already typed out, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that there were other neighbors who are concerned about the aesthetic appeal of our neighborhood. I believe Mr. Belt? He had spoken, and yes, they are very strict on their covenants for our neighborhood, and if we want to get something put in our yard, just adding a sidewalk or a patio, extension on the patio, has to be approved. Our fencing, that was an issue with me because, as Ralph said, Mr. Owen said earlier, that the fencing that we are required to have is the black wrought iron looking fencing, and I was very against having any type of vinyl panel fencing up. If you ride around Murfreesboro, you see those kind falling over because they're not very sturdy. So I would just like for you to reconsider. I've heard everything now. I understand. I know there is a need for the portables, but I also want you to reconsider that people do live right there, and we enjoy the school. It's a beautiful school, and it's a beautiful neighborhood, and we'd like to keep it that way. So thank you. And do you need my address?
Please. Please.
3411 Deerview Drive.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion. It sounds like seeing an example of what the screening would look like would probably help the applicants that are here and certainly the neighbors that are there.
Mr. Huddleston or Mr. Anderson, what's the drop dead date with respects to having to get approval?
I was just asking that, so I'm glad you asked me. School opens August 1st. We've got to start by July 9th. If y'all would like to meet July 5th, we could meet July 5th.
I'd take a poll of
Let me say one other thing. It wasn't my project, but my firm was working on Dollar General. They probably wouldn't mind seeing you again then also.
Right. If we do have a special meeting, we could certainly put both items on the agenda.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes, we could get it in. We could put the advertisement in this Sunday's newspaper.
Need to be another public hearing?
No,
I guess
notice of a public meeting.
Okay.
Right.
To give notice of the meeting.
Okay.
We don't need to have a public
Okay,
hearing.
I understand.
There was metal plate.
Okay.
Mr. Huddleston, could you think you could have a drawing of what that, either berm or screening or proposed fence, whatever it may be?
We can.
At that point in time?
We can.
Okay. With that, I'd like to make a motion that we defer this until a special meeting that will be held on sometime on July the 5th.
Or could we, I will, because Mr. Rogers and Mr. Dodd are not here, and because of the Dollar General, we'll need to have either one of them present in order to have a quorum to be able to vote on it. Before we set a date and a time for that special meeting, will you all allow me a chance to poll Mr. Rogers and Mr. Dodd to check their availability for either the 5th or the 6th, possibly?
Sure.
That's fine. I was going to say you're going to be running out of days, but that, yeah, but you got it right. Yeah.
Sure.
Great. And I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And then no opposed. We will defer action on that one until the special meeting. Our next application is Z12037 by Ms. Lynn Swafford for Providence Christian Academy, requesting a special use permit in order to expand an existing institutional group assembly use, a private school, in a residential single-family RS-15 zone for property located at 410 DeJarnett Lane. The applicant is seeking approval to construct an 18,000 square foot building addition. The applicant is also seeking approval to relocate an existing portable classroom building and to add a second portable classroom building. Matthew.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Young. The subject property is located at 410 DeJarnett Lane. Will you put up the aerial photograph, please? It is the site of Providence Christian Academy on the south side of DeJarnett Lane. It is bounded on the west side by the North Springs subdivision and on the east side by the North Woods subdivision. You'll recall last April the applicants received approval to place a portable classroom building, and this aerial photograph is a little bit old to show that, but it is located right in this area here. Now the applicants are proposing three things with this special use permit. They're proposing seeking approval for a special use permit to construct an 18,000 square foot building addition. The applicant is also seeking to relocate that portable to make room for the building addition and to add a second portable as well. You'll see here is the proposed addition. It is on the southwest side of the building. And you'll see on your plans the outline of the existing portable where it is currently located. And you'll see here where they're proposing to relocate the portable. And the second portable, which would be brought in for not this coming school year, but the following school year, which would be the 2013-2014 school year. And after speaking with Ms. Swafford, the applicant, this morning, it's my understanding that she would like for that portable to be there for the duration of the time that the original portable was approved for, which was 5 years. So essentially, after the 2015-2016 school year would be when the existing portable and the proposed portable would need to be removed from the property. The actual addition, which, as I mentioned, will be located where the existing portable is, has a footprint of 12,624 square feet. However, it will be two-story for a total of 18,000 square feet. It will consist of 4 classrooms, 2 locker rooms, a weight room, 4 offices, and a multi-purpose room. The proposed building addition will be partially located within what is now a drainage easement. The design engineer has been in contact with the city engineer's office, and it appears that the proposed location of the building is feasible with some drainage modifications on site. In addition, the plat which recorded the drainage easement in its current location must be amended to record the new boundary line of the drainage easement. Although the building design has not been completed, the exterior building materials of the building addition will be very similar to that of the existing building, according to the applicant. The area between the existing building and the North Springs subdivision is predominantly a large drainage and detention easement. And this is the area that the building will be located in. It's also very heavily wooded. The majority of those trees would remain. There may be a few near the building that would have to be removed in order to make way for the proposed building addition. But it would still be located approximately 250 feet, the addition that is, and the portables would still be located approximately 250 feet from the western property line adjacent to the lots in North Springs. The proposed location of the portable classrooms, which would be here at the terminus of the existing parking lot near the solid waste facilities, which is about 350 feet from the Northwood subdivision. And even though it would be moved from the side of the, or kind of its hidden location where it is now to a more open location, it is still separated by, as I mentioned, over 300 feet from the Northwood subdivision, and there is a heavy tree line and a buffer along this eastern property line. The applicant has provided some pictures, and so rather than go over my pictures, I will show you the pictures that they have provided. And here they gave a few examples of the photographs of the existing building, which they will be attempting to match with the building addition. And then looking in the area of the proposed building addition here. This is looking south from the proposed building addition. Here's the solid waste enclosure here and the terminus of the existing parking lot. And this is it's kind of hard to see on the overhead, but that's looking west towards North Springs, and that's the existing vegetation in between the subject property and the North Springs subdivision. This is the existing portable classroom building. And this is looking south. It's another view of the existing portable classroom building. And this is, I think it says looking east at the location of the two temporary classroom buildings, but I believe it's actually looking west. And then where it says looking west, I believe that's actually looking east, and you can see that stand of trees along the boundary with the Northwood subdivision. If the board approves this request, staff recommends the following condition. If the drainage easement is to be disturbed as shown on the site plan, an amended plat delineating the new boundaries of the drainage easement must be submitted to the Planning Department for review and approval. Subsequently, it must be recorded in the Register of Deeds office. Ms. Swafford was not able to attend today, but I believe that Mr. Ben Bobo is here representing Providence Christian Academy if you have any questions for him. And also, I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
Any questions for Matthew? Mr. Bobo, anything you'd like to add to this application? Okay. At this time, we'll hold the public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the application subject to the recommendations of the staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And there are none. That application's been approved. Our next item is application Z12038 by Mr. David Evans of Mantle Tedder Architects, Inc. for Fellowship Bible Church, requesting a special use permit in order to construct an institutional group assembly use, a church, in a residential, single-family RS-15 zone for property located along the east side of Veterans Parkway, south of Franklin Road. Matthew.
Thank you, Chairman Young. Get my materials out here. The subject property is located along the east side of Veterans Parkway, just south of Franklin Road. This property was formerly owned by Family Worship Center, and you may recall that in 2008, Family Worship Center had a church approved for this for the subject property. As it is zoned RS-15, an institutional group assembly use in the RS-15 zone would require a special use permit. Their church was proposed to be located further north on the subject property than this present application. Family Worship Center has since sold off the southern half of the property to Fellowship Bible Church, who is the present church who is wishing to locate on the property. Family Worship Center never built on its property, and it still owns the northern half of the property, which is partially zoned RS-15, and the frontage along Highway 96 is zoned commercially. Because the boundaries of the property have changed, and because the site plan has changed, because the architecture has changed, because it's a fundamentally different plan, even though a church has been approved on what was the larger former parcel, the applicants were required to come back to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit because it's essentially a different plan than what was approved back in 2008. As I mentioned, the plan that was approved in 2008, the building was closer to Franklin Road, and this proposed building is further on the south of the subject property. And you'll see here, here is the property line that separates the Family Worship Center property here, which is the northern half of the property, with the Fellowship Bible Church property. The southern portion of Fellowship Bible's property is very densely wooded, and they're looking only to construct in the area that is currently in the open, cleared area on the subject property. Of course, this used to be a part of Moreland Lane and was reconstructed as a 5-lane cross-section and is now called Veterans Parkway. The applicants are looking to obtain special use permit approval for both Phase 1 and Phase 2 today. They're fairly certain of how they want to build their project for the long haul, so they're looking to get approval for the entire project. And the numbers are a little bit different than what was shown on the original site plan. And you'll see this email in front of you, which is from the applicant's consultant. He states that the first phase is about 12,800 square feet with 300 seats in worship, and the second phase will add actually a new worship center with a total of 800 seats. The total master plan, he says, is correct, but we will max out with 800 in worship at one time. The site plan shows 1,000 seats in the worship area for when all is said and done in Phase 2, but what he's saying is that there will be 800 seats and not 1,000. And also the Phase 1 numbers showed over 14,000 square foot of building, and what Mr. Angie is saying is that that will be about 12,800 square feet instead. The subject property is 16.32 acres in size, and it is currently undeveloped. The general development plan for the Blackman community, which is used as a planning tool for both the city and the county, recommends that the intersection of Veterans Parkway and Franklin Road develop as an area for future local commercial uses, and it recommends that the area south of the intersection along the east side of Veterans Parkway be developed as medium-density residential. But in residential zoning districts, institutional group assembly uses are seen as being compatible if they meet certain standards that are in our zoning ordinance, which the Board of Zoning Appeals is charged with reviewing. As I mentioned, Phase 1 will include 12,800 square foot building and a 300-seat auditorium and 171 parking spaces. When both phases are complete, the total building square footage will be 43,381 square feet with 800 seats and 300 parking spaces. The paperwork submitted by the applicant denotes the office hours and service times for the proposed facility, and there are also some architectural renderings that I'll show you shortly. While the architectural renderings do not depict the Phase 2 building addition, it will be a continuation of the proposed building architecture shown on the renderings for Phase 1. And the exterior materials for the taller part of the building, which will be used as the auditorium, will include a stone base and a concrete batten material above the stone base. The shorter part of the building will have a stone base and hardy siding above the stone base. The building, both in Phase 1 and Phase 2, is proposed to be only 1 story. The building height for the sanctuary will be approximately 25 feet in Phase 1, according to the applicant, and slightly less than 35 feet in Phase 2. The applicant has addressed the other standards for institutional group assembly uses. I will mention that none of the parking is proposed to be located in the required front yard along Veterans Parkway. We did receive a photometric lighting plan from the applicant that shows that he does not exceed 0.5-foot candles at the property line, which is the standard that is used in our zoning ordinance. In looking at the surrounding land uses, staff does not believe that a buffer is warranted in this situation. It's zoned single-family residential to the north and to the east. It's bounded by public right-of-way to the west, and is also zoned residential to the south. Only the northern portion of their property will be developed, and they already have a thick tree or stand of trees that dominates the southern portion of their property. And with the property to the north and to the east being undeveloped, it doesn't seem appropriate to require a buffer in this instance. If the board approves this application, however, staff does recommend the following condition, that the subject property must comply with all city subdivision regulations, and that will be reviewed at the time of site plan review and approval. What I'd like to do now is show you the computer-generated renderings that have been provided. This is the front of the Phase 1 building that will be facing Veterans Parkway. This is zoomed out quite a bit more, looking at the building from Veterans Parkway. It seems funny talking about a building in the present tense when it's not there yet. This is a view of the entrance into the building. This is a view of the shorter portion of the building, which is not the worship area. And as I mentioned, bear in mind that all of these renderings are just for the Phase 1 building, but that the applicant has indicated that he will continue the same style and type of architecture on the Phase 2 buildings as well. Phase 2 building as well. And there will be a small playground area on the south side of the building. And now some actual present tense photographs. I guess these are actually past tense since I took them about 10 days ago. But this is looking at the property from Veterans Parkway. And this is kind of viewing that southern stand of trees that dominates the southern portion of the church's property. This is looking south on Veterans Parkway. And there are existing single-family residences across Veterans Parkway. As I mentioned, this was a portion of the Veterans Parkway that was formerly known as Moreland Lane. Some of the additional residences across the street. And looking kind of north and across the street on Veterans Parkway. With that in mind, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. David Evans and Mr. Tim Turner, who are representing the church as their architect and engineer, respectively, and I believe Mr. Monty Waldron, the pastor of the church, is here as well, if you have any questions for him.
Thank you. Any questions for Matthew at this point? Anything the applicants would like to add to this? Mr. Evans, Mr. Turner? Anything else you'd like to add? Okay. At this time, we'll hold the public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or a motion.
Vice Chairman Young, I will make a motion that we approve this special use permit, subject to all staff comments.
I will second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that one? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? There are none. That application has been approved. Thank you. Next, we'll move to staff reports and other business, and there is an item there. Mr. Lewis will brief us on progress report for Public Chapter 862, Continuing Education.
Chairman Young, I know I'm here today to present this mid-year report for our continuing education courses, and I have a little handout I want to hand out, so I'll be so we know what we're talking about.
Thank you.
As you know, we have to have training every year, and board members and staff members have to be educated and re-educated. You all have to have 4 hours every year. Staff has to have 8, and we're still having the meetings in the legal department the first Tuesday, typically the first Tuesday of the month, or Monday sometimes. It kind of varies now. But they're at noon, and we have schedules. I don't believe I put a schedule in there, but you may have already got a schedule, and there's another schedule for the second half of the year. I'm not sure it's come out yet, but we'll get one to you to let you know when these classes, these hour-long teleconferences are, to let you know that they're available for your use. You know, with this handout, I've showed how many hours you all have. And like I say, if you attend any other courses or any kind of classes during the year that you think that you might want to have credit for, just let me know. We'll work it out, see if you can get some credit for it. But if you have any questions about these teleconferences at noon in the legal department, just feel free to contact the planning department, and we'll work these out.
Great. Anything else along those lines? Thank you, Mr. Lewis there. Any other staff reports?
If the board members wouldn't mind sticking around after the meeting so I could get their availability on the 5th and 6th for a special meeting,
Sure.
I would appreciate it.
Sure. And if that's all, we'll stand adjourned.